Hello everyone, welcome to this video. I'm going to be discussing the next 5 chapters of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Last time we left off with chapter 6, the Portkey, and so far to this book, we're not having the strongest start. At least not compared to the previous books I've graded on this channel. So I'm curious to see where this book is going to go. So far, my experience of Goblet of Fire has been that it's really exciting. The events that are taking place are really exciting, but oftentimes the way they're being described are a bit too slowly paced. We're not moving through them fast enough. So I think that is highlighted by the fact that we are 11 chapters in and we haven't even set foot on Hogwarts grounds yet. So we're just getting there. I mean, the very next chapter is titled The Triwizard Tournament. And so that will be our introduction to really what this whole book is about. So, yeah, I mean, we're about through it. And we still really don't know what the main sort of plot's going to be for this book. So it asks a lot out of the reader. And for that reason, I haven't had the highest ranking chapters. Some of these chapters feel like they could have been condensed into one with the main point sticking out. But I think JK was really writing a book at a point in which she wasn't under as much pressure to keep it as concise, because at this point she had been a commercial success and she was afforded the liberty really to be as explorative as she wanted to be with this book. And so I do think there's something to be said for that. It is really fun, and I know that creatively when I'm in that space, I really enjoy it, to just be able to go in all of these different directions and to not be as harsh with what's being cut out. But I will say on reread, it makes it a bit of a drag because we're having to stomach going through a lot of side questy feeling plots. And especially on a reread, what you find as a reader is that you're looking for that, like the main thread of what's going on, So I think this book is really enjoyable on first read, really, because so much of this is new that just the fact that it's new is enough to keep you engaged and interested. But on reread, since I already kind of know these elements about the Wizarding World, it's not enough to keep my attention hooked the whole way through. And so I'm feeling a little bit bored, to be completely honest. But at the same time, I am enjoying it. I find that if I give myself the time to read it and indulge in it in the way I would indulge over a cup of coffee, that it puts me in the right mindset to appreciate this book, because it isn't about getting to the end, so to speak. It's the greatest opportunity to spend additional time with our favorite characters, and I've always been the type of Potterhead who could have watched probably an 8-hour Harry Potter movie. I don't know that I still could, or it's hard to feel that I have the time to do that anymore. But I think it's mostly that if I'm allotting myself the time to read it, I do still really enjoy it, being that they are such big books and I'm just busy, I guess, and it can feel unproductive sometimes reading these books. It can feel like I don't have the time to read it. So hence also why these videos have been coming out a bit more sparsely, and I'm not even doing full books at this point. I'm just doing sections of the books. It's just a big, beefy sandwich. And with the previous 3 books, I was doing skims, I wasn't really going into each chapter on reread, but with this one, I really wanted to just reread it because when I do the skimming, I spoil everything and I don't get to really read it again. And so I didn't want to do that with this book. This book's always been very special to me. I wanted to just reread it and give that treat to me. And for you guys as well, it gives a little bit more of an honest representation of how this book hits as a reader. So with that said, the chapters we're reviewing for today are chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Bagman and Crouch, the Quidditch World Cup, the Dark Mark, Mayhem at the Ministry, and Aboard the Hogwarts Express. These chapters, I would say, are significantly more interesting than the ones that preceded it, than the first 6. They're a bit beefier. We're kind of getting back into that J.K. Rowling stride of like having a long, meaningful chapter. This stretch starts with the arrival of the gang at the Quidditch World Cup, and it ends with them leaving the Quidditch World Cup in shambles and getting on the Hogwarts Express to finally arrive at Hogwarts. So this is the whole meat for the World Cup section here, and I want to take you through it. With Chapter 7, Bagman and Crouch, I awarded this chapter a 7 out of 10. It was just a mediocre chapter. And so far, the numbers, the 7 in my ranking system has been pretty high. It's been the ranking that I give a chapter that is good, but that's about it. It's just good. And I've been considering lowering that. My standards are getting a bit sharper as I do these because, as we'll see later, there's some chapters I gave a 6 that maybe I would have ranked higher if I was ranking them on the same standard as before. But I feel like I'm getting a bit harsher with these, because I'm fine-tuning my craft as a critic. I don't know. But Chapter 7, Bagman and Crouch, we're getting to meet 2 very important characters in the wizarding world. Ludo Bagman, who was an ex-Quidditch player, who is now part of the Ministry. Everybody loves him, but he's not exactly the greatest professional at his current job. And Mr. Crouch, who is, he's not the minister, that's Fudge, but he's a high-ranking ministry person. I forget his exact title, but a high-ranking person who's, I think, kind of running the Quidditch World Cup, and he's the person who Percy is brown-nosing and just is really sucking up to. This is definitely the book where Percy's going to become the most insufferable version of himself, if not in book 5 as well. But this is like, it's kicking off. He's fully drinking that corporate Kool-Aid right now. Moving on to Chapter 8, we get the title, The Quidditch World Cup. I gave this chapter an 8 just off of pure excitement. Again, it's not even the best written chapter per se, but it introduces so many fun elements that, and again, with these rankings, it's personal enjoyment at the end of the day. It's not necessarily the case that I have a 6 bullet point type of structure where I'm making sure it hits all of these things. There's really nothing objective, I guess, about what I'm saying, and how could it be? Like, this is my opinion, right? This is my opinion. This is just what I find enjoyable. So the Quidditch World Cup is one of my favorite things about this book, about the wizarding world. I remember being very excited about even just this idea of there being a World Cup of Quidditch when I was first reading these books. And it's still one of the things that when I'm going to reread this book, I go, oh yeah, I get to see the Quidditch World Cup. I get to experience that again. So it's fun, and especially compared to the movie where we don't get to see any of it. And I understand that. The movie, I mean, how can you make this book into one movie? It's really a tall order. It's really fun. We get to see the leprechauns, the Vila, we get introduced to Crom, and the game plays out how it plays out, but it was cool to see a professional Quidditch game in action. And nothing really more beyond that. The details of it don't matter that much, but it was Ireland versus Bulgaria, and Ireland won, but Crumb got the snitch, and so we get to see a Quidditch game end in an interesting way, as well as some cool technology, like with the binoculars that slow stuff down, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione getting to kind of be baseball spectators, that kind of vibe. It was cool. And we also get introduced to Winky, which is very important, who's sitting up there by herself. And already these chapters are getting more interesting because we're starting to have like stones of plot relevant information that is going to play out later. JK is very cheeky with how she uses these details, right? The fact that she's sitting by herself or she's even up there. This is very standard for how she writes, for how many authors write, where these details, seemingly innocuous, start to play more significant roles later in the story. So on reread, it makes it extra exciting because you already know, whoa, this is part of the main plot. So we meet Winky. We develop the empathy of Hermione, the sort of civil rights injustice for house elves that she's feeling. Certainly that we can relate to reading these, especially after meeting Dobby. Like, it's interesting to see how that dynamic exists and what the house elves themselves think about it. Looks like Dobby's a bit of an extremist on their side of the camp. He's different. Most house elves would not agree with Dobby, but that doesn't mean Dobby or Hermione are wrong. It just means that when a fucked up thing is the standard, it kind of becomes the way people associate the norm for reality and for life. And so it is really messed up, the dynamic between wizards and house elves. And albeit tradition does not mean it isn't really poorly inhumane and cruel. So Hermione's absolutely right about that. I know they don't develop this, JK doesn't really develop that line further into other books. I know it's pretty much just this book. Maybe, I guess she touches on it in book 5, but I guess we just had so many other, stories to tell that just didn't become a part of it as much. But I do enjoy it in this book. It's one of the threads that I like to follow that, again, I don't get in the movies. I love the movies, by the way. This isn't a critique, and I don't compare them. I don't like to compare them constantly because I really just look at them as two different things. Albeit the same universe, but like in a way they're parallel universes. They're not really under the same parameters. So, and I love both, so I have no issue with the movies doing what they have to do to work. The books are really long. So that chapter gets an 8. Moving on to chapter 9, The Dark Mark. I gave this chapter a 7. Another just kind of decent chapter. It's chaotic. Shit's really hit the fan. Everything was wonderful and happy, except for the opening chapter, of course. And now we're tying back in that Voldemort is inexplicably connected to Harry. We're doing this subtly. I mean, it's more so that the Death Eaters are out doing bullshit, doing their racist bullshit. And we don't know at this point who conjured the Dark Mark. Of course, we do know if you've read the book before, but Winky gets blamed for the Dark Mark that appears in the sky. And something kind of confusing about this chapter is you would have thought that the Death Eaters who were creating all the panic and abusing the Muggles would have been the ones who conjured the Dark Mark, since they're very clearly celebrating those values, if you can call them values. So it was interesting to see that the Dark Mark itself was something that everyone was in agreement wasn't something they created, because because of the fact that they would be scared if Voldemort returned. That was just a little confusing to me because it represents literally what they're doing, but at the same time we're being told that it isn't them because the Dark Lord himself would actually be furious with them for not having kept up the tradition, let's say, of the cruelty for all of these years. So, and the mark is conjured up later. So they're in the forest. We run into Malfoy. We get the feeling that his dad is probably amongst the hooded figures. It's giving real KKK kind of vibes. Just everything, the mentality, the actions, all of it. But in the forest, Winky is caught with Harry's wand, which turns out to be the wand that made the dark mark, which would really make Harry look guilty if not for the fact that he's Harry freaking Potter. And so why would he, enemy number one of everything the dark mark stands for, be the one to conjure it or even know how to conjure it? But it doesn't make sense that Winky would do it. And so the most probable scenario is that a wizard, obviously a Voldemort supporter, conjured it and disapparated. People have been apparating and disapparating out of those grounds the whole book so far to get to the World Cup, so it's not like he can't disapparate. And apparition happens immediate. So I'm a bit confused. I mean, I know it looks really bad for Winky to have the wand. And a lot of these things don't make sense because why is it Harry's wand? Why does a house elf have it? And who did it? None of these things make sense. But there's no way Winky did it. There's no way. And so the whole line of questioning just really makes the adults in this moment, especially, it might have been Cedric Diggory's father who was really laying into Winky. It wasn't a very calm and rational way of going about it. I get it. There's a lot of panic going on and people are ready to lay blame, but like, there's no way it was this. It was no way it was Winky. Like, this makes no sense. I mean, how? How would she know how and why? Like, there's really no reason to believe it was her, especially knowing that apparition exists and it happens immediately. And we even have the first person testimony of the children who heard the voice who spoke it. So at that point, we should all know it wasn't Winky. It was some wizard. And we need to find out who it was instead of blaming Winky. But that's not really what happens. I guess they have to still investigate. They don't necessarily blame Winky, but she ends up getting the short end of the stick. Barty Crouch Sr. gives her, not Junior, Senior gives her the punishment of clothing. He doesn't give her clothes in that moment, but he says she's going to receive clothing because, I don't know. I guess he really feels like he has to save face. This, of course, is something that Percy defends, and Hermione and Percy start really, really start to symbolize or personify, this representation of the two kind of opposing sides in a society, which is the kind of conformist view, right, of authority and what authority says is right, which would be Percy, and the humanitarian view, which is looking at the value and life of humans and their kin, and so that extends to house elves. Really, it extends to anything that is alive, right? The rights of life, the life rights. You could call them human rights, animal rights, plant rights, but just the life rights. The humanitarian stands on that side. They're really a globalitarian, you might call them, or a faunatarian. Defending life, right? Defending any sentient life, you might say. But it's hard to draw that line anywhere, from plants to animals to people. It's like, if it's alive, it has some kind of respect, or it merits some kind of respect and dignity. So, an authority is just a web. So, well, anyway, it's to be respected in the sense that it's going to play out a certain way. Like, you need to be smart about how you handle authority, because you will suffer the consequences of that authority if you don't respect it. But really neat to see Hermione not be shy in her defense of the elf rights. Really admirable. Really admirable. So that's the Dark Mark. I gave it a 7. And the last couple of chapters here, chapters 10 and 11, I gave a 6 respectively. So to chapter 10, Mayhem at the Ministry, I gave a 6. As well as Aboard the Hogwarts Express, I gave a 6. Mayhem at the Ministry, they're basically back at the Burrow, and Arthur is really busy, Percy's really busy. These people that are involved with the Ministry are just working, and at this point, Harry is confessing that he did have a spooky dream at the beginning of this book, at the beginning of this year. And he's wondering, and he's talking with Ron and Hermione, whether or not his dream has something to do with what took place at the Quidditch World Cup. They're also wondering why Sirius Black hasn't responded yet, because he told Sirius first. And at this point, I am in agreement. Like, it's been a while. Where is Sirius? Why hasn't he gotten back? I feel like he was really quick with the responses, and now all of a sudden it's been a while. So that's concerning, especially considering Sirius's circumstances. And aboard the Hogwarts Express, as it says in the title, they get back on. We tease the fact that the adults know that something is happening in the school this year. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. It's the Goblet of Fire. But, of course, the students don't know that, including Fred and George. And so they're all getting on the train, and they're hearing Molly and these other adults tell them things like, I wish I was at Hogwarts this year. It's going to be a fun year. Oh, if only you could come over for Christmas, but you won't be able to because of that thing that's going to happen this year. And they're like, what? Tell me. What is it? What thing is happening? So they get on the Hogwarts Express. They hear Malfoy talk about this supposed event that's happening. Of course, he knows, because his dad is just, obviously, his dad's just going to not respect any of the rules. So Malfoy knows. We get a bit of a tense moment between them. And now it's starting to get a little more, I don't want to say adult, but like a little more intense. Like that kind of childhood, oh, this person is like annoying, is now turning into, we're teenagers, and it's no longer like we're going to say mean things to each other and stick our tongue out at each other. We're going to fight, and we're becoming competent wizards who could cause serious harm to one another. So it's starting to really take a stronger, more antagonistic feel, this thing we got going on with Malfoy. Anyway, we pull up. Anything else that happens in the Hogwarts Express? I mean, not really. It's raining. By the time they get there, it's like pouring, and we run into Hagrid, and that's really the end of the chapter and the end of this video, the end of this segment, the end of what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, it's getting going. We're really like, it just feels like here's day 1, here's day 2, here's day 3. We're not skipping ahead a lot, we're not kind of moving through it. And so to be 11 chapters deep again, and to be 170 pages into this book, and we haven't seen Hogwarts yet is pretty ambitious. It's an enormous task, what she's doing in this book. But it's also why I love it. And we don't need every book to be like books 1, 2, or 3. We don't need every book to be like this either. That would have been awful. But to have a book that is, I always thought of Goblet of Fire as being the kind of opening of Pandora's box into the wizarding world. Like, all right, here's everything. Here are all the toys. Here's, from new wizarding schools to new species of creatures, new magic, a global event such as the World Cup. It just feels the Yule Ball, even the tournament itself. It just felt like boom, explosion of the wizarding world. And I really like it for that reason. I was never somebody who was huge on Prisoner of Azkaban, even though it's the more tightly written narrative. And I think it's because as a kid, what excited me was the wizarding world itself, not so much like the storyline of a given character, which is something I can appreciate more as an adult. If you want to vote, basically what happens is at the end of each book review, I award 3 honorable mentions, 3 chapters that were really good, but were not good enough to receive a 10 out of me. And out of those chapters, you get to vote for one of them. I hope to make a final video, which is a playoff of chapters. Every chapter so far, for example, in book 1 through 3, every chapter that I've awarded a 10, a perfect 10, has qualified for the final head-to-head chapter finale. Chapter, 8 from book 1 versus chapter 16 from book 3. These two received a 10, but which one's getting eliminated, right? And we do this kind of bracket-style knockout tournament to crown a best chapter just for fun, because I like that format. I don't know. Well, if you want to participate, I include an additional 3 chapters of that book as nominees for you, the viewer, to vote on. Because if this is just my opinion, then in that bracket, it will just be the books that I think are great, which is totally fine. I mean, the chapters that I think are great. But I think it would be really cool if there were some chapters that made it there that weren't chosen by me, that you guys chose. Because some of these books, it's like, there's, like in book 3, there might have been 3 10s, I don't remember. But there were a lot of 9s and 8s. They're like really solid chapters that some of you would probably be stupefied to find out didn't make it to the finale. So that's kind of the idea of this, is you get to save a chapter that maybe unjustly, in your opinion, was not awarded a 10 by yours truly. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. Next video should be the next 8 chapters of this book, but I might condense it to being the next 4, to be honest. So, whatever feels right. I'll see you in the next video.